Thank you all for coming. Today we're going to talk about what's going on in the biopharma industry and how some of the current trends might be affecting manufacturing capacity. So first thing I want to talk about very briefly is our bioTRAK database. This is where all of our data has been derived. For nearly 2 decades, we've been tracking supply and demand of recombinant biopharmaceuticals. We look at supply, and right now we are tracking about 170 companies capable of manufacturing recombinant proteins and about 300 facilities. We track a large number of attributes, and we do this from a bottom up. So, we're counting reactors by reactors. And on the demand side, we're actually tracking all of the products in preclinical through commercial that are recombinant proteins approved for the US and EU markets. We have about 1,000 active late-stage programs, phase 2 or later, and probably closer to 2,500 early-stage products. And these are expressed in mammalian systems, microbial systems, as well as others. And for the products, we're tracking a number of attributes, so what phase they're in, what type of manufacturing, the production host, product type, and we're also translating this into kilograms of demand and volumetric liters of demand. How much bioreactor capacity will a product require? And we can also track whether these products are manufactured in-house or if they're outsourced. And we also do track containers and closures as well. This quick sales pitch. Supply, we help our clients and we help folks find a CDMO if they're looking for one. We can evaluate potential site acquisitions. So if you want to know if there's a market for installing a 5,000 liter bioreactor, we can tell you that. We can also do competitive analysis for manufacturers. So if you are a CMO and you want to know what the competition's up to, we have plenty of data on that. On the demand side, we can help folks understand what size bioreactor would be potentially needed for a given product. And with our process economic modeling group, we can also determine quantities of bioprocessing components. So if you want to know how many bags, liters of resin, any widget that's used to make a recombinant protein, we can actually develop a method to actually give you an estimate of what the market is for that. But for today, we're going to view these in parallel. We're going to view supply and demand. And this will help us see where we are and where we're headed. So we're going to talk about manufacturing capacity. We'll talk specifically about mammalian manufacturing capacity. So as you can see, since 2011, we have been collecting data earlier, but just kind of chose this 2011 to kind of give a 15-year look back. We've continued to grow our capacity. So, we grew 1.5, 1.8, 2.3, and looking forward to 2030, we are going to be installing an additional 2 million liters of capacity. So again, I'm sure you've seen in the past year tons and tons and tons of announcements about reshoring and folks building facilities. I will just say that not everything you read is true, and manufacturing isn't manufacturing all the time. It's not necessarily drug substance manufacturing. There are a lot of folks who are putting in DP facilities. They're putting in warehouse depots. They're adopting AI. It's a very broad term when you use manufacturing. But when we go through and we add companies and bioreactors to our database, we're actually really digging in to make sure that these are actually true and present and, these monies we've used for recombinant manufacturing. So manufacturing isn't available to everybody. Not every bioreactor is available to everyone. Various types of companies own capacity. We have product companies who own their own capacity, so that would be like Roche. We have CMOs who, many of them are located around us, who do fee-for-service manufacturing. And we also have hybrid companies, and these are companies that have both their own internal pipeline as well as perform toll manufacturing. And so over the course of time, product companies have traditionally held the majority of our manufacturing capacity, which is not surprising. You know, companies are going to make their products. They invest a lot into these products, and they want to control their manufacturing. But by 2030, what you'll kind of notice is that we're continuing to decrease here. And despite the fact that both product companies and CMOs are installing about 1 million liters each, CMO capacity is becoming a larger piece of the pie. We're becoming much more comfortable with outsourcing. It's, as my favorite phrase is, it's no longer a dirty word. You know, back when we started this, no one wanted to outsource, but folks are much more comfortable outsourcing now. We know we don't need to have our own facility to make our products. So if we look at the capacity that's been installed by the bioreactor scale, so if we divvy this up to 2,000 liters and less, 2 to 10, and greater than 10, you can obviously see by the graph that the number of reactors for 2K, below the 2K, have increased pretty significantly. But when you actually look at the volumes, you'll actually see that the larger than 10K scale hold the majority of capacity. Not surprising, you know, one 10K bioreactors is 5 2K bioreactors. But the trend is that we as an industry are still installing large-scale stainless. Out of the 315 or so bioreactors that we're going to be installing by 2030, about a quarter of those are greater than 10,000 liters. So our industry is still needing and installing large-scale as well as smaller, more flexible scales. So let's talk a little bit about demand. So if we look at this graph, this is a graph of cumulative number of products approved across time. We divvy these up by manufacturing technology. And you can see that mammalian products really kind of do dominate microbial products. And we do have a tiny, tiny little fraction that are manufactured in either plant or insect cells. And you can certainly see that we've gone from 60% mammalian to 70% mammalian. So we have this trend which has happened for the past 15 years that mammalian products are the majority of our marketed products. And that is really kind of attributable to monoclonal antibodies. Because when you break down what these mammalian approved products are, a significant portion of them are actually monoclonal antibodies, whether these are naked monoclonal antibodies, full-length mAbs, fragments, bispecifics, trispecifics, conjugates, antibody fusion proteins. These are all put under the antibody bucket. And so you can see that the number of non-mAb products has been pretty stable, but the mAbs have increased significantly. So now we're at about a 75-25 differential between mAbs and non-mAb products. And since about 2015, you can kind of look at the graph, that's where mAbs began to really kind of rule the roost. And what kind of happened around that time is we really began to look at mAbs as a platform process. You have a structure, you can just plug in different targets to bind to. And so because of that, we've also evolved a much higher acceptance of outsourcing because it's the same structure, it just binds differently. And for the most part, an antibody is an antibody is an antibody. So it becomes platform. We're kind of headed towards something I think is more of a commoditized view of monoclonal antibodies. So if we look at our current pipeline, so these are the products that have been approved, products that are under regulatory review, and then through the various phases. Again, what you can see, which is really no surprise, is that mammalian products kind of dominate this space. Obviously, as products move through the pipeline, the more of one type at one end ends up being more of the type at the other end. So we have 90% of the products in development are mammalian on average, and we have about 73% of marketed products. So if we actually, again, look at the type of products, again, antibody products are dominant. And for each phase, naked mAbs represent the majority of the molecules. So these are just standard mAbs. Biosimilar mAbs, bispecifics, and ADCs kind of follow in that order. But overall, we're very into monoclonal antibodies, and we still are. So when we translate this into demand, we can represent this in either kilograms of bulk drug or liters of bioreactor capacity. So what we see here is that our kilogram demand is roughly around 50 metric tons currently, and is projected to double by 2030. And this doubling primarily occurs from all of the products that we have in the pipeline eventually coming onto market. But we're also including our clinical demand, because obviously we do need to make clinical products for clinical trials. Without that, you can't run clinical trials. And our values are actually risk adjusted. So we do know that if a phase 2 product is going to require 100,000 liters by the time it's commercialized, we know not all phase 2 products are going to make it to market, so we have risk adjusted that value. When we convert the kilogram demand into bioreactor capacity, we do this on a product by product basis, and we take into account several aspects of the molecule. You can see that it comes to about 3 million liters, and that's going to nearly double, we project, by 2030. Again, this is really due to the current commercial demand and the growth of those products, as well as the products that are in development who will potentially be commercialized by 2030. So now we can talk a little bit about future trend impacts. So what are the things that are going on in the industry that might influence our supply and demand? So one of the things definitely is AI and machine learning, and I know that we just saw a talk on that and how it's working in CMC and things like that. But one of the things I think that AI tools are actually going to significantly increase the number of molecules that we are going to see in the pipeline. AI has a unique ability to, I think, find hidden epitopes. I believe that there's a universal flu vaccine that's just been derived via AI, and that's in clinical trials now. So what I truly think is we're going to have more molecules enter the clinic. And these molecules might actually be more precise, so you're not going to need to dose as much. So if you think about ADCs, you're not dosing the same amount of an ADC as you would a therapeutic monoclonal antibody. So I do think that we may end up with a lot of products requiring a lower annual patient dose, and that's going to lead to decreased manufacturing needs. So we're kind of, if you think about this as kind of a push and pull, almost like on a seesaw, because there are attributes and things that could happen with AI which could sway things either way. Another thing which I found very interesting is the regulatory trend. US and EU agencies have been working with several biosimilar developers to craft true biogenerics. And I use this term biogenerics because I want to kind of, they're going to mimic the generic industry, meaning they're going to do a phase 1, they're going to submit their regulatory package, and that's it. So there will be no phase 3. You know, we skip phase 2 because we don't have to do proof of concept. And phase 3, the thinking is that we've done enough with biosimilars. We know what kind of quote-unquote good analytical package we would need. So there are several companies who are working with the agencies to actually not do phase 3 trials anymore, which is kind of surprising, but very interesting. So I do feel that this is going to kind of increase our molecule numbers. It's going to mean less competition for clinical demand, clinical supply, because we don't have to run phase 3 trials. But what this may mean is that we're going to need a quicker commercial capacity. So, you know, you get your phase 1 data, you put your application in, and you need to start your your stockpiling for phase 3, or for your launch. So that is a little bit different. And then finally, the third thing that I think is going to have a significant impact is in the manufacturing processes. So companies are using process intensification to increase their batch output. This is not the continuous manufacturing. This is the N-1, where we're going to increase the amount of cells in our final bioreactor, our production bioreactor. And this actually should, in theory, increase our batch output, so we're getting more out of our same size bioreactor. And we're going to decrease our sweet time, meaning we'll be able to run more products through a given facility at a time. So this will potentially impact both demand and supply. So we're going to potentially increase the quantity of material we make. And then products can be made in smaller bioreactors, because if we're increasing the output, we can shrink our footprint. This also might lead to a shortened runtime, which, as I mentioned, can contribute to a larger number of products per year. So that's all I have. If you want to know more about our bioTRAK database or market intelligence capabilities, or if you want to stop by and discuss supply and demand, I can talk supply and demand till the cows come home. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks, Dawn. That was really helpful. You mentioned, though, that the capacity is going to increase by about 2 million liters between now and 2030. 1 million going to be product specific or product companies, and about 1 million for CDMOs. But geographically, where are you predicting? Because you also were talking about onshoring in the same sentence. So geographically, where are you predicting that growth?
Yeah, for the most part, Europe, despite the efforts of the U.S. government, we as the industry, are still installing more in Europe and Asia than we are in the States. North America has been on a slow decline when you look at the proportion of manufacturing capacity, and truth be told, several very large plants in Asia kind of outscale a lot of what is being built or projected to be built in places like North Carolina. So that is something that we do track as well.
Thanks.
Hi, Dawn. Dawn here. Did you find that COVID, the supply and demand, skewed some of your numbers for the projection?
So COVID was kind of interesting, and we kind of it was a little bit of a tough time trying to figure out COVID. Because in all honesty, we did not build any manufacturing for COVID for recombinant proteins. It was utilizing existing capacity. And we do know, because we did have clients at facilities where one of the mAb manufacturers said, hey, can we got our mAb ready, can we hop in here, can you wait to manufacture your product so we can put our product in? So that was actually kind of interesting. But the part of the problem is that these drugs were not really used. We may have made quite a few, but by the time we kind of got to the point where we had these molecules, they really weren't being used. I had sat on, I think it was a KFF Foundation call where they actually had executives from some of the companies developing these products, and they said, because the medical industry did not adopt them into their, standard of care treatments, people weren't getting the drugs. They were there, but they weren't getting them because that wasn't what the physicians would go to first. So it was a very temporary thing. I don't think, again, it's a black swan event. I don't think that would happen again. But one thing that did kind of raise for, I think, a lot of places where, that we don't have that manufacturing capabilities. So what we are kind of seeing are smaller places pop up that have received governmental funding for pandemic, and they're operating as, a CMO, but have that capacity on standby.
Dawn, I had a question on your opinion on modular facilities that are quite flexible for rapid product switches. Is that a trend that you think you're seeing? Is that something people are looking
Yeah, I
into?
do think that, the ballroom concept, the modular facility, and, you're having multiple projects run at a time, I think that's becoming much more commonplace. Several years ago, it was a very, oh my God, they're going to run 2 products in the same suite. It's a very scary thing because you have the especially if it's 2 different clients, 2 different products, the last thing you want to do is cross-contaminate products. But I think we now understand the parameters and guardrails that we need to have in place. So maybe it's only working with 1 client a day in that suite. The next day is the next client. Something along those lines. But I do think that modular facilities provide a quicker route to manufacturing. It still requires all of the same, validation and getting things up and running. So yes, you can shave some time off. And now with the larger single-use bioreactors, the 5 and 6K bioreactors, you actually can get a little bit bigger scale.
Is there a downside? Are they worth it?
I'm sorry?
Is there a downside? Are they worth it?
Yeah, probably.
Does anyone have any other questions? In that case, can we please thank Dawn one more time, please?